Hello and welcome to another episode of Transcontinental Overload. How is everybody doing? I cannot believe that it's the middle of December already. How did we even get here? But I also feel like December has at least twice as many weeks as other months. I don't know. Anyway, that's my perception, and maybe it's just because it's such a busy month with so much going on. Anyway, I have just the episode for you to take your mind off your Christmas list, or maybe you're listening while wrapping presents or decorating your house, or even if you don't celebrate Christmas, are doing the million other little things that we tend to save up for these last few weeks of the year. Am I right? My guest today is Catriona Turner, who's my second Scottish guest on the podcast. And I love that because, as you know, I'm a language and accent nerd and enthusiast, and I love listening to different accents, and the Scottish one is one of my favourites. Catriona is originally from Aberdeen and is actually living there again after 14 years on the move. She has quite the story to tell. She's lived in so many different places, France and Uganda and Denmark and Congo, and of course we're talking about all of them. And if you're curious to find out more, then you can buy her book. Because not only is Catriona a seasoned expat, she is also a published author. After years and years of writing, amongst other things, a blog called The Frustrated Nester, she decided to take it up a notch and wrote a memoir, which was published earlier this year. It's called Nest, a Memoir of Home on the Move. I was so curious to find out how she accomplished that and what made her decide to write a memoir, because as you may know, if you've listened to my podcast outbursts, that's what I'm attempting to do myself, and it's bloody hard, I can tell you. So you can imagine how excited I was to get the opportunity to talk to someone who has actually done it. And before we jump into our episode, let me just quote what Catriona's mentor, international best-selling author Rachel Herron, said about the book. With lovely prose and deft craft, Catriona Turner brings the reader with her not just to fascinating locations around the world, but through her equally compelling inner journey. Don't miss this memoir of a woman coming home to herself. That's kind of all you need to know right now. Let's hear Catriona's story. Welcome, Catriona, to Transcontinental Overload. I'm so happy to have you.
Thank you. Hi, how are you doing?
Good. I'm so in awe because you are basically where I want to be ideally next year. At this time next year. I don't think I will be, but I'm working on it. So as I said in my little introduction, you have written a memoir about your experience, and I'm really excited to talk about that, to talk about your journey, and then how you got into writing, how that journey has shaped you in that, and at what point that became that thing in your head, like you decided to write the memoir. But before we get talking about the book, I just would like to hear your story in a nutshell, just to kind of hear where you're from and how long you were, I don't want to give too much away, but how long you were living in other countries and all that.
Well, a nutshell. There's no pressure there then. Just keep it all in.
We'll just branch out.
Yeah, and then we'll branch out and then we'll sprout and grow. I left Scotland in 2009 when I was engaged to my now husband, and he got the offer to to work overseas in France for 3 years. But that turned into 14 years and 5 countries and several visits to France in between. So we lived in France, then Uganda, then France, then Congo, then Denmark. Most recently back in France, in Paris for 2 years. But now we are back in the UK.
And you are back where you started your journey.
Back where we started, back in Aberdeen in Scotland, which was where I was working when I met my husband, and but now it's completely different. Then it was me working, dating this guy with this amazing prospect of living overseas, taking time out from my career. Now we have two kids, 14 years of international baggage.
Yeah, and you've packed all that living experience into all these different countries.
Yeah.
So you're not only covering like two countries, but you're also covering continents.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
It's quite something else. But let's go back to the Aberdeen days. So when you met your husband, was it pretty clear from the beginning that he was going to go abroad, or was that a real surprise?
No, it wasn't a big surprise. There was a kind of hint when we were dating that would be something that might come up. And sure enough, it was just after we got engaged that the offer came.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, it was the perfect time for me. We were both already in our 30s. I had been teaching for 10 years and was a bit sort of worn out by that.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly ready to take a break from it, as I thought it would be at the time. And here was this man going to whisk me away from it all to go and live in the south of France. So
yes, for 3 years. Yes. Yes. I mean, it sounds and because I'm so familiar with the whole setup. Even though I mean we did live in the UK for quite a few years before we left for the US, but it was that sort of, yes, of course I'm up for an adventure. It's got a timestamp on it, so it'll be fine. We can just go back after that, and then yeah, and then that never happens, does it?
No, I don't think I've ever really met anyone who has that story. When they do, it's quite unusual.
So when you moved to France, so you basically were like, okay, I'm gonna use this as a little break and kind of reorientate myself and learn French and enjoy all the things that this job brings, because basically you could kind of take a little break from your own career and just see how you felt and what you wanted to do. Like you said, it came at a perfect time. And then how did that work out?
Well, yes, I mean, I was taking a break and I thought I would just have fun. And I think what I didn't realize at the time was it would have been better to have more of a goal for myself than to just go and enjoy it and float along, which was kind of what I did. Although the first year we were there, I did full-time French study. That was an amazing opportunity.
Yes.
And then I got a job in the international school. And I thought I would continue with that, even though I also then got pregnant because it was the right time. It was the ideal time for us to start a family. So there was no big decisions to make. It was just the kind of natural progression how things happened. But in a way that was maybe a bit of a problem because I didn't really have this sense of, yeah, but what am I doing?
Yeah. Because it sounds so idyllic, but actually it's really difficult to know how you're going to feel when you are left to your own devices. And like you said, you moved, you weren't pregnant when you moved, you didn't have children, you just had yourself, and then you have all this time to think about your identity. I guess, I mean, you don't realize how lost you can feel in those moments. And that's, I really love that in your memoir, that whole progression, and we'll talk about that more, but how you can really, it's like, yes, I'm adventure and I have time and all that, all of a sudden you're like, whoa, what's happening to me? And then the real kind of story starts.
Yeah, until you lose the things that form your identity, you don't realize those were the things that were forming your identity. The city I'd chosen to live in, the career I was in, the colleagues, the hobbies I did in the city. All of that was so important to me, and I didn't realize it was sort of holding my sense of myself together until I left it all.
Yeah. And then also I because you moved with the idea that it was going to be for a very limited period of time, and you had that sense of you didn't really commit to the place to start with, and it made me smile so much because I could empathize when you're describing how you had this horrible rug in your apartment, and you like, well, I'm not going to bother doing anything with that because we're not going to be here for long. And then at some point you bought a rug at IKEA, I think, or one of those IKEA similar, and that was going to be temporary. So it wasn't really the rug that you wanted. It was just a temporary solution. And yet that rug traveled with you on every move. I had to laugh so much because my house now is full of items and things that I thought I would discard along the way. And yet they are here, even though I never wanted them in a long term, because it's one of those things you don't want to make the commitment because you feel you're in that transient world, or you live that transient life. And so all of a sudden you realize that your whole identity is becoming this weird mix of transient and not, and it becomes jumbled in your mind and really messes with what's going on inside.
Yeah, it's funny. Everybody asks about the rug now. Where's the rug now? Where is it? And unfortunately, it's just rolled up in a corner of the room at the moment. It hasn't found a spot yet in this house.
But it has a special value. Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, I did love it when we got it. It wasn't, like you say, it wasn't like a big investment. It wasn't something that we sort of spent a long time choosing. But when we came back to this, well, I say came back to this house where we are in Aberdeen, we bought this house while we were away when we were living in Congo. So we'd only ever spent sort of summers here visiting. And in the meantime, we had a house sitter. And so when we came to visit, she had the house very nice for her, but it wasn't our things. And after we came back this summer and moved in, it wasn't until the shipment arrived of all those temporary things from different places that this house then felt like home.
Yeah.
So that was quite funny.
Yes. Well, it's a funny thing that happens, I think, with the objects that you gather along the way, because they do become part of your identity. And that's why I think I've dragged along all these things, because it feels like as soon as I have a certain picture up and a certain rug down and my sort of whatever curtains maybe, I feel a sense of, that's at least that is the same. That hasn't changed. So it creates, and I always felt like I was creating that for the kids as well. It's like having their books and their toys and their favorite blanket on the bed and that sort of thing. Because I mean, it's all you've got when you move so much. And then those
it was important for me to do that too. Yeah, when we moved places, there was one or two things that I would always put in our luggage. So that we wouldn't even have to wait for the shipment.
Yes.
Like at one point I had like bunting, fabric bunting with the boys' names on. And everywhere we went, that got hung up in their room.
Yes.
The rug would end up there somewhere as well. And the boys don't want the rug anymore.
Oh, no. I remember the first house we lived in the US. I didn't even hang pictures because I was so convinced that we were going to move again within 2 years, and I just didn't. And I thought, I just don't want to bother putting holes in the walls because then I have to deal with filling them. And so we didn't. My pictures were leaning against the wall, and that was something the minute we were in our second house, that was the first thing I did. I hung all the pictures. I was like, it doesn't matter how long I am here, I need that. And that was the first lesson, that I would never do that again, kind of treat something as a I don't have to commit sort of thing, because that's what you learn, I guess, when you do make these moves, but you have to go through that. And so that really resonated with me, because I thought, I can't live like that.
No, because it might just be 2 years, but then if you do it again and then you do it again and then you do it again, the years, that's your life.
Yes. And you can't live that limbo lifestyle because you lose your mind.
Yes.
As also comes across in your book, especially if I remember correctly, when you came to the second part, which was Uganda, after France. No, you moved back to
I was in the UK for a few months in between.
Yeah, tell us about that. You knew you were going to Uganda, right? That was happening.
Yes. So we knew, so it came up after the end of, 2 years. By the end of 2 years in France, we knew, okay, they're going to offer us something else. And sure enough, by the sort of late winter, early spring, they were saying, oh, how about Uganda? So we were starting to think about this idea, which to me was an amazing idea. But for my husband, not so much, because he'd already worked in Nigeria, and even when he was a child, actually had lived in Nigeria.
Okay.
He had a sort of clearer perspective on what life in Uganda would be like. So that was fine. I was, happy to trust that and ready to learn about it. And but then in the process of getting our heads around it and starting to plan for it, I became pregnant again, which meant I couldn't get the yellow fever vaccination, or it's not recommended to get that when you're pregnant, which meant I would not get into the country.
Yeah.
You can't get into Uganda without it. So after much debate, we decided that he would go on, start work. I would go back to the UK because we already had my older son by then. I would go back to the UK to have to wait the few months until I had the baby and could then join him. And it all made perfect sense, really, at the time. But then people say, I can't believe you did that.
It added another perspective change into the whole thing, because I want to say, had you stayed in France, then it would have been more like seamless. But this was like getting your head around being back in Scotland, which must have felt like, oh, I could just stay here because this is kind of home.
Yes, I mean, I did think, well, I'm going home, so that'll be easy. And, with the kind of mindset that I had that you mentioned before of never quite fully reconciling with living in France, because treating it as temporary and at arm's length, I was relieved at the idea of going home to where everything is normal and having a break from being foreign and before going out and doing it again. But I hadn't reckoned with the fact that I wasn't going back to my own life, really. I was pregnant. I wasn't going to go back to our flat and live on my own to have a baby without my husband there. And we decided I wouldn't go to my parents, and we went to I went to live with my father-in-law for very good reasons that made lots of good sense at the time. But then there I was in a village that I hadn't ever lived in before, where I didn't really know anyone except for my husband's family. And that was challenging in a whole different way. It wasn't home either.
No, definitely not. And that must have just felt discombobulating even more than France. I can't even imagine that as an extra step. But like you said, you make these decisions and you have to act quickly as well and decide quickly. And you have to, if you have these contracts, you can't just extend that or stay longer. And so by the time you got to Uganda, you were probably quite ready for it, I imagine.
Oh, yes. And what we had got this idea that we had to wait until my younger son was 6 months.
For the vaccine.
Because you can't get the vaccine until you're 6 months. So I was thinking that was how long I would have to wait. And then we learned that, no, he could go any age and then get the vaccine. So I was like, okay, all right, let's go then. I had to stop breastfeeding so I could get the vaccine, but he could come.
I've got those are all logistics.
I have to wait the full 6 months. Once I knew that, I was like, oh, let's get these flights booked.
And then you were in Uganda, and I mean, to me, it sounds very exotic. And what did you do to prepare for that? Because it's not like, France, okay, but it's kind of, it's similar environment and you feel like you know much about it. But what about Africa? I mean, that's a whole other kettle of fish.
I really did very little to prepare because I was still reeling from becoming a mother of two within 2 years.
Yeah.
Within a year and a half, really. And all that, the shifting back and forward, that had been so overwhelming. I didn't really do any preparation with guidebooks or learning very much about the country. I was just completely trusting, that my husband was already there. We had friends there as well that moved there at the same time, and I knew they lived in a nice apartment, and we had friends upstairs, and it was a nice compound, like an apartment complex, and that they were having a good time. So it was all going to be okay.
And sounded good enough. But...
Meanwhile, in the back of my mind were a combination of images that I couldn't shake off, that I knew were not how it was, but it was like Ethiopian sort of footage of the famine in the 80s and post-colonial films like out of Africa, and all of that combining. I could have just done a Google search, I suppose. But what does Kampala look like? I didn't do that. I just kind of went in with this combination of trust and complete flights of nonsense, until I got off the plane and saw the real city,
the reality. And how was that? What did you think when you got there, like those first few weeks?
The first few weeks, okay, so the first few weeks I was probably just overwhelmed taking it all in, the busyness of it, the traffic. It's a city where the traffic is a big problem, but also the kind of contrasts of life there. We were going to sort of lovely restaurants. Kampala is a very cosmopolitan city, very diverse, amazing food scene, amazing restaurants, all behind big walls though. You could go to amazing places, but you would have to go through a gate behind some walls. And so the first few weeks were getting to grips with the city, and this completely different kind of city than a European city. And then also the lifestyle of being an expat, which was not at all what I had experienced in France. Especially given that when we first went there, we didn't have kids and we were just kind of doing our own thing. But to arrive in a city like that, where the expat kind of culture, for good or ill, is a very distinctive kind of lifestyle, where absolutely everybody local expected me to hire staff.
Yeah.
Which was something I'd never done before. And
well, it's not something you grow up with necessarily in a European context, and we're kind of used to just getting on with it and doing everything.
Yes. Yeah, that was the bigger culture shock for me.
Yeah.
Overall, was just getting used to this idea of our driver. I would have to call him before I could go anywhere. I certainly wasn't ready to start driving myself around Kampala at that time. So that made me sort of dependent on the driver. Every morning, our nanny would arrive and be there in my home all day, helping me with my baby, which was amazing. What an opportunity. And probably I can't really compare it, how it would be to have two kids without that help, two very small children without that help. But definitely looking back, it was amazing. But at the same time, it was very hard to reconcile that I deserved it or was allowed to let somebody else, look after my child.
You describe that so well in your book, where you're just like, you've because it doesn't kind of agree with your sense of self. You just hated it. You hated having a driver and feeling uncomfortable about having someone, rather than embracing it and just going, this is amazing. I have this, I'm have to make the most of it. But you were constantly battling that in your conscience, I guess.
Yes, definitely. I don't know if it was a question of identity as much as it was just the culture I came from, where, people who had that much help, like, were considered, as being either very
Mm-hmm.
wealthy or very self-indulgent, and you certainly didn't need that much help. And
Mm-hmm.
how could you go swanning around with all these people helping you?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so there was that side of it, and then also the kind of the cultural attitudes we come from that expect women to, do everything for themselves and not need help,
Yeah.
um, unless they're earning their own income.
Yeah.
And then just a sense of losing some independence.
Yeah.
But it is about learning to embrace it. It's about learning that, this
And
is
is that so when you, because I feel like that was the point where you realized you had a very negative view of everything, and you felt really low. And that was the moment where you realized you needed to get help, and to not, that it just didn't feel right to constantly be have this internal battle, and it was kind of dragging you down. Because I feel like that was probably the turning point in your mind, where you're like, I need to sort this out. I can't live like this.
Yes. I mean, I think there was hormonal turmoil going on as well. And just the kind of, when I look back, this is one of the great things about having written the book, is to having looked at these stages of my life as a story and how they kind of fit together, and even having studied story structure and looking at how Western kind of traditions of story structure, if you take that and superimpose it on these events, how there's the journey, I can look back and see how it's all connected, and give myself a lot more grace for it, because all of that was happening in Uganda right off the back of having had that move in Scotland, that time in between, which, even the 3 years in Pau were constant, in France were constant transition, becoming an expat, leaving my career, leaving my home country that I'd always lived in, becoming a parent twice, like all of that, just every year, those kind of transitions were going on. And that was so that was a cumulative effect, on top of the culture shock in Kampala, that, as I say, was more to do with the lifestyle than the actual place.
Yeah. But this is again, this is something that you can't anticipate. So like you said, writing about it, you have a completely different perspective, and you can kind of heal your former self by writing. You see how it all is all connected, and you see the reasons for everything. And where at the time you're very, I don't know if you're like me, but I very much felt like I could empathize in this. You're so hard on yourself all the time, because you kind of think, I should be enjoying this, I should have a good time. And so I haven't lived in a expat place, but I've lived in like beautiful California, where people are like, oh my God, you're so lucky. And I was like, why can't I just love this and let myself really enjoy this? And why do I always feel so negative, and then kind of berating myself for that?
Yes, and that just compounds and compounds. The guilt of feeling depressed and crying when somebody else is doing your housework to earn the money to keep her family fed. And then you feel worse and worse about yourself.
Yeah.
And I knew that was just my own perspective that needed to shift.
Yeah. And then you look back at it and you're like, yeah, of course. And you kind of pat yourself on the shoulder, and you kind of like, you got through that. And it's a very healing thing. And I just wanted to, because I've noted down a quote, because I really like that. If you don't mind, I'll read that. It's just because it's so connected with everything. So you were in Uganda, and just have to find it. I do that right. It said, I held on to all those negative perceptions, kept them hovering around me like spinning plates, giving each one a twirl now and again to keep it in motion. Because if I let it drop and smash around me, then maybe I'd get too close with this unfamiliarity. and then I would be smashed out of my comfort zone. Those plates were like an agitated barrier, stopping our life in Uganda from getting too close to the real me. And I think that's just it's exactly that. You kind of keep that distance, not letting yourself go fully. And that's also why you can
never be at ease.
Yes. So it's almost like you're stopping something. It's just stopping you from, like you said earlier, living your life. It's because this is your life that's happening. It's not like your life is waiting for you somewhere and you're just in this temporary thing and you have to just get through this in order to get to your real life. No, you are in your real life and you're living it, and you better get your shit together and enjoy it, because otherwise your life just passes you by. And I thought it was just so beautiful the way you've put that, the image of the spinning plates. It's like so relatable, and I just wanted to get that in there, because it's that because was Uganda also the where you realized, okay, who is the real me? What do I need to do to find her again? So there was therapy, but also your other passion, your hobby that you went back to. Can you tell us about that?
Yes, I think I was still figuring things out, very much figuring things out in Uganda. And it was almost by accident that I had that opportunity just before we left. Theatre was something I had done before in the UK, and I had seen that there was this organisation in Kampala, amateur theatre organisation. And to begin with, and amongst everything, I hadn't felt ready to reach out and learn more about it. But yes, eventually I did follow. I was following the Facebook page, and I answered a call for an audition for a production, and went along to audition. And there was a kind of weird miscommunication after the auditions where nobody contacted me for weeks. And I thought, okay, well, I know, not everyone gets a part, but I didn't think I was so bad that they wouldn't even, call me.
Yeah.
And it turned out they'd written down my email address wrong. But in that time, our move away from Uganda was moved forward. And so when they did finally get hold of me and say, oh, we've been trying to get hold of you and we'd like you to be in this production. And I said, oh, I can't possibly, I have to leave in like 5 weeks, something like that. It was a very short space of time where I have to, prepare to leave. And they were feeling a bit stuck, having expected me to show up for rehearsals, and persuaded me, flattered me, to be fair. I went, got drawn in by some flattery, and I said, oh, all right then. And I really went to these rehearsals, still really in an unfamiliar city, because we were in Uganda for less.
Yeah, it's so brave.
And getting the driver to take me across town to a suburb I didn't know, to people I didn't know, going to these rehearsals and thinking, I'm not enjoying this. This is not comfortable at all. And slightly resenting it until the week before the actual performance, which anyone who's done amateur theatre knows that you have this very intense time when all of a sudden, you really have to work.
I can't even imagine what that's like. And so you were sat on packed bags, but you were still on the stage.
More or less. I think the performance was about 2 weeks before we left. Maybe a little more, but not much. But that week of being in a theatre together with people, pulling together to create something, intimate friendships that are often very short-lived but intense. And it was just so thrilling, and it reminded me of, what I had been doing a few years before and why that had been the hardest thing to leave. When we first left the UK, I really didn't have an issue with taking a career break. I didn't really have a big problem with, moving away from my family. We were already in different parts of the country, and family's always there anyway. when I left behind the musical theatre group I was in, I just thought that was such a wrench. I would never get to do such a thing again. And I mean, I haven't gotten to do that kind of thing again. But the things I have been able to do, like perform Dylan Thomas in Uganda and amazing things in other countries too, you can't create that opportunity in any other way. So yeah, that was really helpful to having kind of mentally left the country to actually get pulled back in such a vibrant and kind of dynamic way.
Because that's pure emotion, really, isn't it? It's making you connect with who you used to be.
Yes, connecting with myself and connecting with the place in a really meaningful way. And that was, one of the most memorable experiences of my time there. So,
and then what came next?
Then back to France, where we had been living before. And we knew this was going to be for less than a year, because this was to help my husband sort of shift his career path in the company. This was for training. This was for doing some studying and training. So we knew it was going to be for a short time.
And you knew where you were going to go after that?
Yes, and after that we knew they were saying Congo. And in the company, but they had been saying Congo actually before we left Uganda. In this company, they often change their minds. So we thought, they're saying Congo now, it'll be something different in a year, but actually ended up being Congo.
How did you feel about that? Because I mean, there must be some part of you who's like, I probably similar lifestyle, the expat lifestyle, so you're kind of familiar with it. It's Africa again, but quite a different and politically and all that. It must have been.
Yes, I mean, my expectation was that it would be much the same, and that this time I would be ready for it and I would take advantage of it. I would have maybe a big house with a big garden, like lots of people I knew in Kampala. People had amazing properties in Kampala, even though we were just in an apartment. I imagined having this big garden, outdoor living, and I certainly knew I would look after myself more in terms of.
So you'd learned your lesson.
I had learned so many lessons, how I would interact with the people who might be working for us, that I wouldn't be resentful of that anymore. I had learned all of that. So part of that certainly was the case. But Congo is nothing like Uganda in terms of the town and the house with the garden. We didn't get that at all. Just different. The Congo's in some ways less developed than Uganda, with sort of less diversity. Very French, actually.
And my friend, French speaking.
Yeah. My French friends, when I said, "Oh, it's so French here," they didn't see it at all. They were like, "But it's Africa." It's like, but it's Francophone Africa. It's still, the influence is very strong.
So you would say you got there, you had a whole different attitude because you felt like you learnt your lessons, and you also knew Congo was going to be temporary. You had a time frame for that, or what?
Yes, I remember correctly. We knew it would be temporary as well, but having been one year over the previous few moves,
it's a lot.
We knew that Congo was going to be 3 years, so it felt like a long time.
Yeah. Well, clearly, and you were looking at that differently than when you first moved to Po the first time, and you knew you felt like that's a temporary thing, and now you've got 3 years. That's you can take that on a completely different level. Yeah,
absolutely.
So what were the lessons that you learned in Congo?
So I think what I really learned in Congo, which I had been starting to learn before, but my time there really clarified, is that you just don't know what opportunities you can open yourself up to just by saying, Yes. And I mean, when I arrived in the country, I knew I would want to meet as many people as possible, try as many different things as possible. And in the international community there, I sort of jumped into everything for the first few weeks, just to sort of take advantage of what was on offer, the book group, the book camp, all the different groups and coffees and dinners.
It can be such a fallacy though, can't it? It's that thing where you throw yourself in and you find all these things that take up your time completely and your energy, and then you still kind of feel empty because you still like it's almost like it distracts from something that's going on sometimes. Or I've felt that way when I've taken on all these different things where someone said, do you want to do this? And I said, yes. Like you said, you say yes to everything because that's how you meet people, that's how you go out. But then all of a sudden you feel like, but where's the real me in all this? Is this really just filling my time? And so how was that? How did you cope with that?
I think, well, you have to do that mindfully. And I think by then I had learned that I was sort of gathering all these opportunities and connections and possibilities so that I could then choose where I wanted to really focus my attention. And before we arrived in Congo was when I had really figured out that I needed to not just wait and see what would happen when I got there, when I got anywhere. That's what I'd been doing. I'd been thinking, oh, maybe in Uganda I would get a teaching job, but then we were only there for a year. Maybe when we move somewhere else, maybe there will be a teaching job for me there. Maybe there will be people who want tutoring, or I'll see when I get there. That was not satisfying at all. And that was not like just in the same way as that, temporary furnishings are not going to satisfy, how you feel at home. You're not going to satisfy yourself by having a wait and see temporary kind of attitude to how you use your time. And I certainly didn't want to just fill my time. So that kind of reflection I had gone through actually before arriving in Congo was, okay, so what can it be? Actually, what I have here is an opportunity. It's not a constraint. It's this chance I have because I don't have to teach. I kind of unlock that part of my brain. It's like, this is the career path you are on. Actually, who says you have to stay on that path just because those are the qualifications that you once had? I gave myself this opportunity and I said, well, actually, if you were 16 and you could just pick whatever it was you wanted to do, because I in the situation we're in, I had no obligation to be a breadwinner. How amazing is that?
It's an amazing opportunity.
You get to do, and that was when I realized that I wanted to write. So I had arrived in Congo with that idea that was how I would, focus my attention to begin with, would just be pursuing a writing career. Sounds like a big word to say when you're just creative goal for yourself, but that was what I was trying to do.
And at that point, had you already decided or thought about what it was you wanted to write? Was that already, because I'm sure you kept some notes and things along the way?
I had I really thought that I wanted to be a travel writer, that I wanted to focus on place, and that's where I really sort of can sink in when I'm writing, is just describing a place, which isn't always the story that's helpful for other people, but that's a style of writing that I love to do. But also I started doing some fiction. I did some courses, online courses. I did one with the Faber Academy, the publisher in London. So I have some fiction projects that I have worked on that are waiting for me to come back to them. And at the same time, I was blogging. I was writing about our expat life. And that was what was really resonating with people.
Yeah. It's interesting what resonates with people, and where people see something where you don't necessarily see it yourself.
And then sometimes you're just finding that phrase, that expression that somebody else attached to and say, oh, yes, that's it. And that those are the moments where I thought, oh, I should do more with this, because people would respond by saying, oh, you've described that so well. I hadn't thought of it that way before, but that's what it is.
It's exactly what it is. Yeah, that's why you're reading your book is just, it's exactly, there's so many situations, and I was like, yes, that's exactly it. And
I think that's the value for all of us, anyone who's interested in trying to write about it in that way, because the way you see it might just be the way that somebody else needs to read about it.
Yeah.
Even if somebody else has already written something, sometimes it's your perspective that somebody else needs.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. But I love how that point, and like you said, you did online courses, you went on a retreat, writing retreat, and that sort of thing. And it's like, it's something where you're taking this seriously, you're taking yourself seriously, and you're putting yourself first, and you have made that decision that you're just going to give that more weight. And I love that. And but then you're still on that journey, because you know that you're still going to move to another place, because that's still on the cards. You had those 3 years to maybe shift that perspective and honor that what was inside of you, that desire to write. And then you moved again.
Yes.
And then how was that?
Oh, it was wonderful. We moved to Denmark, and for years Denmark had been my dream destination, and it was never on the cards. The company had no office there, but then they bought out a Danish company, and it was suddenly on the cards. So and I was ready for, that shift back into the northern hemisphere, Northern Europe.
Less of an expat lifestyle.
Yeah. The seasons, get to wear boots again and woolens and
yeah. What was it about Denmark that made you want to go there?
I don't know, because I had never even visited. This sort of Scandinavian lifestyle was presented in this really appealing way, and friends that had visited really loved it, and I loved watching Danish TV.
I love that. I just love that idea, and then that it's actually happening. It's almost like you were manifesting it a long time ago, and then it happened. And then obviously, with if we look back at the timeline of that coincided with the pandemic, right? So you ended up being in Denmark, and they closed the borders. So, because I feel like that the COVID had such obviously had a major impact on everything, but on expats and people being in the middle of moving or just making decisions, it added so much more complexity, and even it's like any decisions made during that time were so much heavier than I think for other people.
Yes.
There was one thing that you when you were in Denmark, and your husband was the one who said, well, should we get out? Should we go back to Scotland? Should we leave before they close the borders? And you said,
I said, no. Yeah, it was quite a surprising reaction that I felt in my body as we sat on the sofa, and the announcement came through that the Prime Minister Mira was closing the schools and sending everyone to work from home, which was they were actually the first in Europe to announce that outside of Italy. So it was a bit of a surprise. Everyone else followed suit pretty quickly. And I didn't see it coming, but I did not want to move from that sofa. I really physically felt it, like this right here, sitting on this sofa. I don't want to be anywhere else. I don't want to get in a plane. Traveling at the moment, no, I didn't want to do that. But more than that, I didn't want to be somewhere where I didn't have any of my routines. I didn't have any of my stuff around me, back to stuff again.
Mhm.
It's not that important, material things. But then again, if you're going to literally spend all your days in one place, the things that you have around you matter. And every time we'd come to, we had this house, but every time we came for a visit, we were living out of suitcases. We were living in a very temporary way. And I couldn't imagine having to come here, go to supermarkets where I hadn't been shopping for years.
So you just had that
doctor we should be going to if somebody had a fever.
Yeah.
Whereas in Denmark, albeit it was a foreign country, we had those immediate kind of routines and processes and habits around us.
So do you think that was kind of the moment where you're like, no, I am actually really living my life right now in the moment, and I'm not thinking back or ahead or anything. I'm right here, right now. Is that that's how I felt when I read that. It was like that was that moment.
I think that was the moment where I realized that home was not, necessarily about a place. It was about something else. Certainly, I had been learning that home could be anywhere at all. Home could be something inside of me and how I choose to spend my days and the people around me. But in that moment, home was also the place where I physically, felt comfortable.
I love that, because there is that construct that we have where we take home with us. It's wherever we go, but there is the theory of that, and then actually living it and feeling it. And that's kind of when I read the book, that's where I felt like, that right there was the connection. That's when it all came together. But of course, you didn't stay in Denmark. You moved again.
Yes. Yeah, the book kind of ends about there, because otherwise it could go on forever.
Yeah, well, there's time and you can write another book. I just learned because I'm taking a course as well on memoir, right?
Brilliant.
Because I'm also trying to take myself more seriously with this, and so that's like you need to learn what not to write about.
Oh, that's definitely the hardest part. Yeah, let's talk more about that, about the writing.
Yes, absolutely. So when I read the book, and then so that's kind of where it ends, and you don't go into Paris at all, really. And it's like part of me was like, oh, I really wanted to know about Paris. And then I thought, but actually my brain can't. It's like, this is wow. I look forward to reading about that at another time, because I'm sure Paris, 2 years in Paris.
I'll have to figure that out. It's a shame that I was so busy finishing the book and getting the book out when I lived in Paris that I wasn't really writing about Paris. Which is like, Paris, come on. There's so much I could be writing. And I'll revisit that.
It's so hard doing something and living and experiencing everything and working on something. So you're absolutely forgiven.
Thank you.
But yeah, who knows? You might have an idea for that. But also, if not, then it's not what the memoir needed to be about. Something else. So
yeah. And what I'm doing now is I am writing about repatriation. I'm working on that book.
Yes, that's amazing. And obviously, because you only just repatriated, you need to give it more time.
Well, what I'm doing is, because I don't want to lose momentum with my writing practice, is I am writing a chapter a month, and people can read that now, if they're interested. I'll come back to that. But
yeah, because that's a whole other story. And going back to, I can't even imagine. It's like I've spent about half my life outside of Germany now. So for me, it's I'm at the halfway point. I've passed it now, basically. So it's repatriate where, really.
Yes.
To me, it's
yeah, and that's a very complicated question for so many people. And to be fair, it was not a complicated question for us. My husband and I are both from here.
Yes. Yeah.
We knew we always had this intention of coming back here for some of the boys' secondary education. So It wasn't complicated. 14 years is long enough, but it's not half our lives.
Yeah. But still that's a big chunk. And so yeah, let's talk about the writing the book and how that at what point did that become your, like, okay, I'm going to write about this?
It I worked on it to begin with in earnest in 2019. So that was when I realized that I wasn't very good at making up plots for fiction because I was struggling to, come up with the ideas. And I love being a writer because I love sentences and I love crafting sentences and paragraphs. I didn't start out thinking I have stories I must tell. Some writers are really storytellers and then they have to learn the craft. I'm a bit the other way around. So I thought, well, tell you what, I have this amazing story already.
Yeah.
People are interested in it. I don't have to make it up. I'll try and write that first, and then I'll have written a book. So that was part of the reason. Also, the fact that, yes, people,
the good reason,
resonate with the way I told my stories. But the first draft I did in NaNoWriMo. Have you heard of NaNoWriMo?
No.
It stands for National Novel Writing Month. And it's actually in the month of November.
Okay.
And it started in America, but it's international. So the website is nanowrimo.org.
Okay.
And anyone can sign up. You pledge to write.
I'll put that in the show notes. Yeah.
Yeah. You pledge to write 50,000 words of a novel in the month of November.
Excellent. Yeah.
If you're a rebel, it's a memoir, or maybe it's a second draft. But the core of it is 50,000 words, which is 1,667 words a day. That year, I did do 50,000 words. I spewed it out. I call it the brainstorming draft. Like it wasn't even coherent. It was just, this happened, this happened, this happened.
Just unleash it onto the page.
Yes. And a lot of repetition and and then over the following couple of years I tried revising it in various different ways, playing with different structures until I found the structure that worked.
Did you have someone helping you to find that structure, or was that at that point where you just working it all out by yourself?
I had a little bit of help no, that's not fair. I had a lot of help, but only one coach. I only had one coaching session with her, but my sort of writing mentor, Rachel Heron, who has written a
memoir writer.
Yes, she's a memoir writer, and she has a book called Fast Draft Your Memoir, which I highly recommend.
She goes in the notes too.
Yes. And so this really, her book, Fast Draft Your Memoir, really takes you through the process of finding a structure and this question that we were talking about earlier, figuring out what to put in and more importantly, what not to put in.
Yes.
Which is absolutely the hardest part of the whole process for me.
Especially if you've already written something and then you have to be
yes, and it's knowing when you're so close to your own story, it's really hard to know which are the bits that the reader really needs for them to go along with you, and which are the bits that you think are important, the context all around something that is just a distraction.
So it's almost like you have to completely distance yourself from yourself in a way while you write this, even though you are as close to yourself as you can be, but also you have to have a kind of a weird bird's eye perspective, I guess.
Yes, but I think that has to come later, though. It has to come in revision.
You have
think
to
if you're
brain
thinking
dump
too much
first
about that in a draft.
And
also that's why it's so important to have an editor. Because until it goes to an editor, until it goes to a reader, you're never quite going to know where the boring details are.
Yeah.
you know, there were so many bits in my story where I knew I was saying, now you have to understand that this happened because of this and this and this and this, and feeling that I had to justify or explain, and knowing that the reader probably didn't need all that context.
Yeah,
And,
God,
you know,
yeah, I'm at the brain dumping stage, so I'm just, I want it all out, and then I'll take a deep breath and
I think that's what you have to do. I think you really have
yeah,
to gather all that, get it down on paper, and be uncomfortable with it, and sit, you know, sort of get used to the idea that it's going to feel rubbish. It's going to feel bad.
yes. Oh,
And
but
but
then
when you go back to it,
mhm,
it's not, first of all, it's not as bad as you thought it was. And then you've got something to work with.
yeah. But I think, yeah, it's that moment when you let someone else read it and they say, we have to get rid of this and we have to do this differently. And you need to work on this. This doesn't sound good. And maybe it's a piece that was really close to your heart and you have to either let it go or change it. And that must be, see, I dread that terribly. But at the same time, I think, and this is something that you and I have experienced numerous times in this crazy expat living, we are not comfortable with being uncomfortable, but we are used to being uncomfortable. We have done this before where we put ourselves in positions of extreme discomfort. So I kind of feel like there's one hurdle we know we can take.
Yeah.
And
the transition from writing it down to
yes,
becoming an author, which is
yeah,
a different thing. But I think when you're doing your first draft, the stage you're at just now, you don't think about being an author. Don't think about the reader. Don't think about the audience, because it's nowhere near them anyway.
no,
Yeah.
I have to do this for myself first and foremost, and then we can look at it again. And I'm learning enough about it. And like I said, you take those classes and buy books about it and read a ton. So I'm trying also to read a lot, because I always feel like when I read a lot, it's immediately reflected in the writing as well. And so that's but yeah, it took me a long time also to get to that point where I'm like actually giving myself time and allow myself to do that. But yeah, but congratulations on becoming an author, because it's huge and the book is beautiful.
I'm so pleased with how it looks.
Yes, I mean the layout, and that's a whole other story. I know how to get that, but yes, I'm nowhere near that yet. But I mean, you've done amazingly, and I really really love it. And I'm tempted to put might include a cover photo definitely on the socials when I post this episode. But yeah, Nest, a memoir of home on the move. It's just flows, and yeah, it's a really good read. So I really really enjoyed it.
Well, thank you so much for reading it, and thank you so much for how attentively you read it.
Oh, but like I said to you, I was constantly thinking yes. And it's just amazing to see how it all came together, and you did what you set out to do. And that leap from being someone who dabbles to becoming a writer and then a published author, I mean, that's huge. And I love that you say you're using your momentum and you're not stopping now. You're just and that's what it's all about, isn't it? Just do what you love.
Yes.
Before we finish our conversation, total change of gears. I always ask this at the end of an interview, and especially for someone who's lived in so many different countries, you must get those moments where you maybe right now where it's 4 o'clock in the afternoon and it's dark because you're in Scotland and it's cold and grey, and there must be those moments where you miss the countries that you've lived in, or miss specific things from each country. Is there anything that kind of stands out, and is there anything that you do when you when you have those moments? Is there any traditional food that you cook?
We have one or two little things that we've kind of taken with us from different places. Like we always have a Danish flag on the table when it's somebody's birthday, because that's what they do in Denmark, which was the oddest thing when I got there. And everything was red and white when it was a kid's birthday party. I'd have flags everywhere, but now that's a thing I always do. And something else that's really a solid tradition in our family now is making a galette des rois
for New Year's
in January. For Epiphany, the 6th of January, I think. Actually, I properly learned to make it when we were in Congo and the boys went to French school, and I volunteered one day as a parent helper when the grande section class, so they were 5, 6, they were making galette des rois, and that was when I learned how to make it. Was in the class.
Fantastic.
My 5-year-old son. And so now we make it every year, and we have our own fève, which is the little glass bead or bean that they put in the galette.
So, is that for good luck for whoever finds it?
Yes, whoever finds it is the king.
Mm-hmm.
Wears the crown. Yeah, that's a tradition that we have kept with us. And you know, I think at the moment my boys are quite resistant to this idea that they have a French side, because learning French is not always easy for them. But I definitely, it's because so much of our time was spent either in France or in Congo where we were speaking French. So that's been the biggest influence on us. And having just been living in Paris for 2 years, I'm definitely, you know, doing everything I can to keep my French side going.
Yeah.
My version française, I call it.
Oh yes.
And I cannot not say bon appetit at the beginning of a meal now, which I'm sure I will go through life the next few years of life in Aberdeen with people rolling their eyes thinking how pretentious, but it's just going to trip out.
It also coming, it's like, this is something I've never understood about English Anglophone culture, that there's no expression really that you say, because in German you say it as well. But why doesn't that exist in English? It's really it's sort of those very baffling things. So yeah. Well, anyway, thank you so much for your time and
thank you
talking through this process.
I've set up a link for anyone listening if they want to read the first 3 chapters of Nest for free. It's thefrustratednester.com, which is my blog website, thefrustratednester.com/overload. So I'll share that with you as well. And from there, the listeners can listen to the first 3 chapters for free.
Fantastic.
Not listen to, read. I haven't done the audio.
You haven't done the audio.
That's a whole other project.
Yes, you should do it in French too. Thank you so much, Catriona. This has been fun and interesting.
Thank you.
Yes, absolutely loved having you.
Thank you.
So that was my conversation with Catriona. What do you think? I was so excited and inspired by what she said that I pretty much stayed at my desk after our conversation and wrote a few pages. And that doesn't happen every day, believe me. So when those moments come, you have to carpe diem the heck out of them. If you are interested in reading Catriona's book, it's widely available. Of course, you can go to her website, thefrustratednester.com, and use the link that she mentions for the first 3 chapters for free. And I've put all the links in the show notes. I really, really recommend this book. It's such a good read, and I guess you could hear that. You could hear how much I loved it in our conversation. And I also highly recommend books as Christmas presents. So if you still need something for a special someone, maybe someone who's an expat or thinking about becoming an expat or is just interested in different cultures, here's your chance. I would be very happy to find this in my Christmas stocking or under the tree. So yeah. what was I saying? Yes, show notes. I put all the links in the show notes. There are a few other things that we mention in our conversation. The writing month, and a link to Rachel Herron and all that. And also Catriona has kindly sent along her recipe for galette des rois. So if you're an aspiring baker, there's a challenge for you for the new year, for Epiphany. And don't worry, she's also included an English recipe in addition to the French original. Oh, but who knows, maybe you're learning French as a New Year's resolution. So you can take your pick. And now I'm starting to babble. So let's just stop right here. I will let you get back to your end of year shenanigans. And I'll be back on here on the podcast in the new year with a little update of what's going down at my end. But for now, let me wish you a Merry Christmas if you're celebrating, Happy Holidays, and of course a wonderful new year. Guten Rutsch und beste Wünsche fürs neue Jahr. See you next time.